Okay, so chasing the trend, that's sort of this, what we are going to classify as a don't try to pursue that, don't chase that. These next things we're going to walk through are actually things that you may actually pursue. And we've actually seen in the real world, these things lead to wealth building. But you need to go into it with eyes wide open because the reality might not be the same as what the brochure tells you.
And man, we went right to the heart of this. I mean, a lot of people talk about real estate, and we absolutely love real estate. We're 8-figure real estate investors ourselves, but we always tell you real estate's one of those things. First of all, everybody I've seen that's extremely successful, it's not super passive. It's also one of those things where it leans heavily into leveraged debt, which, by the way, the amplifier of leveraged debt, where you put down a small down payment, you finance it. Yes, it can be a multiplier of your money, but it also comes with a big risk and a big thing. If you're not scared or looking at it as dangerous as you're using it, you're probably using it at wrong. So we want to kind of get into how do we use real estate? What are the strategies that you see out there trumpeted on social media? Are they fact? Are they fiction?
Yeah, generally real estate is supposed to be a long-term investment. It's supposed to be something that you participate in for a long time to be able to generate the reward from it. And if you think about real estate here in the United States, over the last 20 years, home prices in the U.S. have increased by 99%.
Wow.
So on the surface, that sounds amazing. And you're thinking, holy cow, 99%, they've doubled. That's amazing. And while it sounds like a lot, if you actually look at the math, that only works out to an annualized return of about 3.5%. So over 20 years, 3.5% turns into a 99% rate of return. So while real estate can grow and can add value, often it's not a fast, rapid thing that takes place.
So we've put together a case study. We said, hey, what about an option one if we're going to use real estate? Let's just go with the basic, meaning our home appreciation on our primary residence. That's what most people do. I do want to say, look, we used that 3.5% over the long period. There's been periods over the last 3 years, Bo, where I know real estate was appreciating 9% annually because of the pandemic, all kind of strange distortions. So you probably could have done this with lesser money in the past, but that doesn't mean that you could do it as easily going forward, because if we had such a big run up in the last 3 or 4 years, it probably means this is going to be more muted or mitigated, slowed down a little bit, especially with interest rates over 7%. But Bo, walk them through, if we're talking about home appreciation only, how would this work?
Yeah, so think about the mathematics that surround this. If you wanted to make $1 million and your timeline was 10 years, and the way that you ultimately want to do it is through price appreciation on the real estate that you're purchasing, what you'd essentially have to do is you'd have to buy a piece of real estate that costs a little over $1.7 million. So if you're going to try to do this as quickly as possible, you're going to put down a 3% down payment because you got to leverage as much as you can so that it can grow as fast as possible.
Good luck with that.
On the $1.7 million home that you're going to purchase, you have to put down $52,000 as a down payment. Well, then if we assume over the next 10 years, the house appreciates at 3.5% per year, you would have an appreciated value of $712,000 over that 10-year period. So you've got your $52,000 down payment, you have the $712,000 of appreciation, and you've been paying on the mortgage the whole time. So you've actually paid $236,000 in principal payments on the loan. So when you add up the principal payments plus the price appreciation plus your down payment, boom, you just came up with $1 million in a 10-year time frame.
Now, look, on the surface of this, I mean, because I'm adding the $50,000 for the down payment, which is a stretch, $235,000 of you paid down the debt. You are out of pocket on this. Now, look, we're leaving off some things. We'll talk about that. But on the surface, it looks like you put down $300,000 towards this house, and now it's worth, you got $1 million or $700,000 of appreciation, so you have $1 million made. That looks great, but there's obviously some flaws here. What are we missing?
Yeah, it sounds great. There are a number of flaws. Let's start with the very first one. Saving up the down payment. Saving up a $52,000 down payment to purchase a $1.7 million home will probably take some time. you have to find a lender that's going to be willing to loan you that much money on such a small down payment. So just saving the down payment in and of itself is a hurdle that you'd have to get over.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and I've kind of alluded to this too. There's some friction costs here. Obviously, closing is going to be expensive on $1.7 million. Maintenance, taxes. We're still leaving a big question mark that's coming up in the future. And then you just alluded to, Bo, you'd have to find a lender. Look, we told you, first time home purchase, we're all about getting on that home ownership train with 3 to 5%, not the 20% that you hear all the other gurus. But I think we're talking about kind of beginner home. Your first welcoming into this. When you think about a $1.7 million home,
it's a big matzo ball.
That's a lot to ask, and I think the banks, the lenders, they're going to give you some pushback on that. It's also going to create a monthly payment that you're responsible for at over $11,000.
So think about what that means. You now have this monthly payment to satisfy the mortgage of this home of over $11,000. So if you think about $11,000 monthly payment playing out over a decade, the total payments you will have made on that mortgage, a little over $1.4 million. So this idea of, I have $300,000 out of pocket and I turn it into $1 million, that's not really the case. You actually had to outlay $1.4 million in order to accomplish that.
That's because when we were talking about the $50,000 down payment, the $250,000 of principal paid down, we forgot to talk about the interest.
That's a big
deal. And right now, with interest rates being over 7% on mortgages, you're going to be in business with the bank on this whole journey to seven figures. So obviously, that's maybe the best days for that were in the past. Let's talk about something that may be a little easier to digest and a little more approachable. And actually, this is a unique opportunity. Let's talk about house hacking, bro.
Yeah, so house hacking is this idea that you buy a property, but you put someone else in it that pays rent that could likely cover the mortgage. So maybe this is a single family home, maybe it's a quadplex, so on and so forth. So we started working through the math of what would be required in order for you to house hack and ultimately end up with $1 million at the end of 10 years. And so this is what we figured out. You would have to buy a home that costs $523,000. You're going to have the down payment, you're going to put 3% down, which will be about $15,000, $16,000 on that. And then over the course of the decade, with the value of the house increasing, again, we're assuming 3.5% annual price increases, and then we're assuming the principal that you pay down on the house, you're going to have about $302,000 of total equity at the end of that 10-year period. So you bought this house and you had the mortgage, the rental income coming in that paid the mortgage, but you said, I also realized I need to get to $1 million. So I'm going to take the exact amount that I would have been paying on the mortgage, and instead of paying on the mortgage, I'm going to start investing those dollars. I'm going to start putting those dollars to work. And that number is $3,408. That's how much you would have been paying on the mortgage. Well, if you, instead of having to pay the mortgage because you're house hacking, you have that money saved, you're going to save about $409,000 over that time period. Well, if you take those savings and you then invest that, and you can earn a 10% rate of return over that time period, that $409,000 would grow about $289,000. So if you add up down payment, price appreciation, principal pay down, saved mortgage amount, invested over that period, you get to $1 million.
Now, I think, because you just threw a lot of information very quick, but here's the big takeaway for me. House hacking is legit, but realize if you want to avoid doing mortgage fraud, because why is house hacking such a profitable or good thing is that it takes advantage of the fact that banks, and when you get your mortgage, they give you preferential treatment for your primary residence. So you are actually buying your primary residence. That's what allows you to have less than a lower down payment of 3 to 5%. It also, because you're living there, the bank thinks you're less of a risk because you need shelter. So they allow you to do this. So you can't use this strategy to buy the house and then move out very quickly, because that might be mortgage fraud. But this does work very well if you want to take on a roommate, if you want to buy a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex like Bo talked about. But here's what I don't like. This feels very rushed. So I'd like to talk about the flaws in this, because even though this is a legitimate, unique opportunity, house hacking is one of those things I could think work. Even this scenario, because of the 10 years, has some flaws.
Yeah, one of the biggest flaws is you have to save up for the down payment. Remember, you have to come up with about $16,000 if you're only going to put 3% down. But good luck finding a lender that's going to let you buy a multifamily property with so little down. I think most lenders recognize multifamily properties are likely going to be investment properties, so they want a little bit more skin in the game. So just finding a lender and saving up that down payment is probably going to take some time.
Yeah, I think there's also, of course, with all real estate, there's some friction costs, closing, maintenance, the interest, all those things add up over time. And then another thing, because when you do house hacking, whether it's the roommate, whether it's the duplex and you're renting out half of it, you are now in the game of essentially you're the landlord. And to assume that you're going to have 10 years of quality renters, that's somewhat optimistic.
It's bold. I hope it does work that way, but that is not often what we see. And the other thing that we see is that we assume that in this analysis that the renters can cover the full mortgage or its equivalent. And while maybe that's the case, if you buy a duplex and you're charging someone half, who's renting half of the place and it's going to cover the whole mortgage, maybe you get that math to work, maybe not. Now, we recognize we didn't build in rental increases. That would obviously come into the equation. But this is kind of, for this to work, this had to be the best of the best of the best of the best scenario.
Well, and to lean into that, because we assumed 100%. If they were covering it, not only did they cover all the costs, but then we invested fully the amount above and beyond essentially our full mortgage interest and the costs that it would to carry this. We actually put that out in the stock market and invested. That's a pretty rosy assumption there. And then I want to put one more word of caution. Like I said, this is something we actually like, and I think it is a unique opportunity. However, I do want to say this about house hacking, is that sometimes I asked you, Bo, I said, how many in this community we live in, there just don't seem to be a lot of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. Nope. It's just, that's not the layout. That's not the zonings in this area that we live in with high cost of living and so forth. And then I think about like when we lived in Georgia, there were a lot of duplexes that you could buy into, but if you were, because remember, you have to live in this building also. This is what makes it a hack, is that you're the landlord that's also living in it as your primary residence. It would have been harder to send your kids to the school system that area was zoned for, because it was not ideal. The area with the best schools were. And then it's something you need to be very aware of, is that on paper, this is great, but just make sure it aligns with your goals and the needs of your family.